If you want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond, then you're in the right place. This is the Property XPerts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy.
Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you once again for tuning in. If you're a regular and if you're new, you obviously had a bit of an introduction of who we are and what we do. We run multiple businesses, 6, 7 and 8 figure businesses. We've scaled from scratch. And in every weekly episode, we hopefully give you tips to grow your business and to learn from the mistakes that we've made and to progress weekly doing so. We've got quite a fun interactive session today with a lot of FAQs that came off the back of our site tour. So we'll roll into the agenda. But for podcast listeners, it's the 25th of April, 2025. And as a bit of an introduction, as you saw at the beginning there, we're aiming to deliver 1,000 homes and £1 billion worth of property in the UK across the businesses. So we'll dive straight into the agenda because we have a lot of interactive stuff to go into. So this week we hosted a invite only site tour special. Maybe if you want to be on that list next time, maybe DM us and send us something to come along. But we had a site tour which drove loads of questions, which we've actually jotted down the majority of them, so you haven't missed all. We'll be talking about the Property Funder Podcast and the HMO Podcast. We'll be talking through the valuation on Marlow. I don't know if you can recall a few weeks ago, but we had some issues with the lender struggling to get to the value with the revalue. So we'll tell you how we resolve that. So this is once we're on site, the valuation at the tail end. And we'll be talking through the legal process at Marlow as well. And then we'll be talking through if we have building control sign off at St Andrew's Court. I feel like Ben's had this probably as his screenshot of his phone just because he's been working on it all days of the week and working through the night. We'll be talking about our social housing portfolio and what update we have there. We'll be running through our end of year accounts and how we sort of manage that process and what we did this week to get those over the line. And of course, and please do ask questions. We will answer live. Doesn't cost you a penny. And please make sure you get as many questions in because we like questions, and see if you can ask us a question that we can't answer. But further, let's get cracking.
Let's jump in. Oh, why have I gone backwards? There you go. Oh, so yeah, like Jack said, we had a really long day yesterday from 10 till, I guess we all set off from probably like 7:30 in the evening, to be honest. A couple of people stayed behind and had drinks and some food at a local pub, which was nice to sort of get a bit more intimate and speak to a couple of our sort of historic investors, potentially new investors. And yeah, it was a really, really fun day out. We visited 4 sites. You can see them on the screen now for those that are watching during the video call. Top left is Marlow, which is 8 units. Top right is St Andrew's Court Tame, which is 20 flats and about 6,000 square feet of commercial space. Then we've got the Old Maltings bottom left, which is will end up being 21 flats plus 2 houses. And then the latest acquisition, if you've been tuning in over the last couple of weeks, you'd have heard the fact that we completed on a bank. So we bought the Old Halifax in Abingdon, which is just off the High Street. And we went there finally to sort of talk about what's going to be happening on that site. We've started the strip out. And we talked through all of the goings on and what we're up to. But obviously through showing people around and talking through what we're up to, how we're doing it, there were lots of questions that were thrown to us, which is amazing. That's what it's all about. We're there to kind of field the questions and give people an insight into the process that we've gone through and how we funded it, how we've found it, how we delivered it, what planning permissions we got, all that sort of stuff, everything. But there were very much sort of frequently asked questions at every site. So we thought we'd pull out some of those FAQs and if they are being asked at every single site, there's clearly a want and need for people to understand those specific questions about each one. So hopefully it helps you guys, gives you a bit of value in terms of the questions that we were asked. Before we go into that, Jack, do you want to give a shout out?
Yeah, I'll just to say, funnily enough, he's actually always the one that steps forward and asks to help along with the event. So Matt Kirch knows friend of ours. He runs, he's worked at various different debt lending entities, and we've been a borrower on some of our sites and paid him back. So we're his best friend. So he predominantly is raising a fund that he's going to be pushing into the UK market. It's US money. We've worked with him. He's super easygoing and very good and pragmatic to work with. But just a big shout out to Matt for, I suppose, sponsoring the food and always being supportive of our events and coming along, whether it's us treating him or vice versa. So shout out to Matt. If you want to reach out with him, DM us and we'll share his details if you want to basically work directly with a debt lender who's going to have discretionary capital that they can deploy in finance. That's it. Let's get on to the Qs.
The FAQs. So we've got 8 questions. They were the FAQs from the day. I'll rattle them all off initially, and then we'll go into detail on all of them just so you know what's coming up. How do you structure the funding? How involved do you get with the design once building has started? How did we find the sites? Why do you not do D and B on the current projects? That's design and build. How do you decide to sell or hold? What were the build costs, which is obviously one of the big ones? What are the key metrics of the sites? And then finally, how much more will you grow? So let's jump back to number 1. How do you structure the funding, Jack?
So we went to visit 4 sites, and all 4 probably had a very similar structure, but different in each capacity. So our typical development, so we're talking about larger developments, typically over 1 million in exit value, we will set up a limited company. That limited company will bring in the debt finance from the bank, which will normally be on some sort of refurbishment or development facility with the funds to deliver the project. We would then either bring in an investor that's on a fixed loan, so almost like a mezzanine/fixed loan setup, or a joint venture, which is a 50-50 JV. Funds come in, and in both instances, the investor has a second charge. But obviously, in one instance, they get fixed return, and in the other instance, they get a share of the profit. So it's kind of like whether they want to ride the highs and lows of this from an equity perspective, or just carry hopefully a fixed return. So that's typically our structure. Evidently, XP ourselves can be part of the investment as well, which means we get a larger chunk of the pie. But that is typically how we structure it. The debt lender and the equity lender will always need a deed of priority between them. They'll always need to know who each other are and what each other's roles are. But we try not to complicate it further than that. So technically, typically we've got 100% finance on pretty much all of our projects. We might need to fund some soft costs to get the project going. But that's our typical traditional structure. We have done some other things like crowdfunding, or even got so much value in a deal that we don't necessarily need to bring in investment or invest it ourselves. So we've kind of done a mix of all of the above, but that's typically our structure.
Nice. Good stuff. Question number 2. How involved do you get with the design once building has started? Very is the short answer. The design doesn't stop as soon as your building contractor starts. There are so many things that will go wrong, that will need to be changed, that where you see potentially more added value or unlock areas that you didn't know about if you haven't stripped out the building, for example, and you start works and start stripping things out and start to see things in a slightly different way once that strip out's finished. So I don't think it should be a case of ever just handing over a sort of REBA stage 4 detailed design package from an architect to a contractor and then expecting that that's the end of it. There's a REBA stage 5, 6, and 7 for a reason, because there's always things that you want to tweak and change and clarifications needed. And we've changed our mind on various things from a design perspective throughout the project duration. So yeah, we are very involved, fundamentally, because I guess it's Aura Architecture, my business, that generally designs the XP projects that we do. We're always going to have involvement through that process. There's a much more stringent need for a principal designer role throughout the whole build stage nowadays, as part of the sort of Building Safety Act and the building regs principal designer role, and that should generally fall on the architect. So there will need to be often a an architectural involvement throughout the process. They're likely to be the ones that are sort of either instigating or certainly sort of drawing up any design changes that happen during the build process. So yeah, we're very involved. That is my background. That's where I see things from an added value perspective, where I feel like I can add value during the whole of the building work stage. I think that probably answers it.
Yeah, very good.
Number 3, how did we find the sites?
Obviously quite a general question, and if you tuned into us a lot before, we sort of go against the grain of all these off-market gurus, and we buy a lot of stuff on market, and we see our value is creating the deal, creating the structure, creating the funding, creating the design, value engineering the construction. So typically most of our sites are on market. We've kind of got a bit of a knack of how we sort of pinch deals quite successfully, even though they're on market. About understanding your own competitive advantage is really, really, really key. There is actually, if you go back to, I did a deep dive special called Jacquisitions, and this will really help you understand how you find sites effectively and can basically beat a very busy market, because it's very competitive out there. You only can really secure sites on market if you're very efficient at analyzing what you're doing. You know where to allocate your time, because some projects just don't work, and you need to communicate that very promptly back to the seller or agent or whoever it may be. But typically on market is our structure. Marlow was actually off market, so that was brought to us via our own network. I always say I might mess this up now, 4 ways to find deals. You have on market, so estate agents, Rightmove, blah blah, and sources. You then have your own network, which is typically people that know you do what you do, and then you typically also then have direct to vendor. So you sent a campaigning letter, and then you also have people outside of that. So essentially, they're the areas that we believe that you find deals. Marlow came from our network. Tame came, it was technically on the market, but it was being marketed by a surveying company, so it wasn't necessarily market wide. The Old Maltings, which was the second site in the first site in Abingdon out of the 2, was completely on the open market, and that was all about how we handled that bidding process to win the site. And then the bank was fortunately through an agent, but not necessarily on the market. So a mix of them all. If you do want to check out that episode, it's season 3, episode 10. So I think it's about 8 episodes ago where I did a deep dive on just acquisitions, if that's what you're struggling with in your business. It's actually our most viewed live now. 500 views.
Yeah, there's lots of value in there. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely head over. Cool. Number 4, why do you not do D&B on the current project? So that's design and build contract. So typically there's a couple of ways that you can procure projects. You've got a traditional contract where a design team will pull together the full suite of documentation, drawings, specification, structural engineer, mechanical engineering, all the package of information, and then you will go out to tender on that design package and basically sign up to a traditional type of JCT contract, which is the most common sort of type of building contract you're going to get into. There's various types of JCT. D&B is one of those JCT, but a traditional sort of minor works or intermediate building JCT is a more traditional way. So the D&B is where effectively you're giving away a bit of control for a bit more certainty on cost, I guess is the best way of describing it. You're basically saying to a contractor, giving them a more of like a performance specification where you say, this is what I'm trying to achieve out of the project. You might give some target thermal values, U values, target sort of employer's agent type specification. And the contractor will then come back to you with a fixed price for that specification, basically. But you lose a bit of control in that process. They're effectively going to be trying to bring it in they're going to have to try and bring it in for that value. And by doing that, you might lose a bit of quality and control over the final finishes and how the scheme looks. So typically we've always done a traditional JCT contract where we've got the design team to design the scheme. Again, we can have full control over that then. And then we go out to tender and sort of value engineer if we need to do a bit of tweaking or bringing the costs down, for example. But there's nothing wrong with going down the D&B route. I think with sort of our skill sets internally and the control that we want to have on the design and quality of the finish, a traditional route is more suited to what we do. But it's horses for courses, really. We're looking at a site at the moment whereby we may well contract manage the packages. So ultimately packaging up a dry lining spec and a package of information for bringing in a dry liner to do what they do, packaging up for an electrician to come in, packaging up for a mechanical engineer to come in, a heating engineer to come in and just do their do their works, and that's a separate package contract. So yeah, there's various ways of procuring the projects. We like the traditional route, but there's nothing wrong with going down the design and build route as well. Cool. How do you decide to sell or hold? This
really good question, because we actually had this a few times. I think most people actually asked this. Yeah. So I kind of feel that there's a lot of people out there in the property world that are kind of one or other. I know a lot of developers that will only sell, and I know a lot of developers that will only hold. Currently in the market, the finance market is making it more and more difficult to hold blocks of flats. You can almost get to a point, because mortgage rates are significantly higher and a lot of running costs are significantly higher, i.e. insurance, maybe some service charge to maintain the site, maybe a little bit of communals, electricity and things like that. Because those costs are greater, predominantly mortgages, it means you're just getting less cash flow at the end of the cost. So your net profit is significantly lower than it was, because where we were at 2.5-3% mortgages, we're now getting like 4, 5 or 6% mortgages for block products, and that's double the price or triple the price. So the net margin is significantly impacted. So to give you an example, our block of flats in St Helens Mill, we've got about £1.4 million worth of equity in those assets that we can't get our hands on because it's locked in on a 5-year product, and we're only making about 36k net on that block of 14 flats, whereas HMOs still cash flow pretty well, and selling the flats brings the opportunity cost of the cash back into the business so we can retrade, reinvest into higher cash flowing properties like HMOs. So what we're currently doing is kind of a blend of part selling and part holding HMOs into our portfolio. Reason being, HMOs cash flow really well, and the sales from the resi sales re-inject capital back into the business to do new deals and grow the new pipeline that we need to grow. So some of it is market dependent, some of it is asset dependent, some of it is also potentially investor dependent. What do they want to do? But predominantly we're led, and they're led normally by the market conditions and what sort of interest rates you're securing and net cash flow you're securing. And then also weighing up whether that could be better used in the business rather than just sat in an asset with, granted, maybe some capital appreciation, which is normally quite good with leverage, because if you're 25% of the value of the building, which is on a fixed mortgage, and the value of the building goes up 5% over a few years, you're materializing that 5%, not the debt lender, because you're obviously servicing that. So that's our current position. It will change, and we will do more of one and some more of the other at different times. We've held quite a lot to date. I think we had about a 50-50 model. Now we're probably 80-20, but we're forever fluid. And I feel like property development, you have to be fluid. Otherwise, if you're stood still, you're actually going backwards. So that's how we decide.
Nice. Number 6, what are the build costs on those four projects? So they're all conversions for the most part. Part conversion, part external changes, things like balconies, windows, doors, dormers, Velux roof light, gardens. Some of them are, we've got some new builds going in as well with the likes of the old Maltings and St Andrew's Court if we get through the appeal process, which is something we haven't touched on actually, but we do have an appeal lodged, and it's very far progressed on those 2 houses. I reckon we'll probably get a decision back in the next couple of months on that, whether or not we're successful with the appeal for 2 new houses in the car park or not. But the build costs ranged on all of those 4 projects, somewhere between £140 per square foot and £160 per square foot. We've discussed numerous times around how long a piece of string that question can be, and it's so site dependent. There's lots of nuances with each site. depending on logistical access, how easy it is to get things in and out. There's a part of the old maltings whereby we've got to remove a shit ton of steel from the turret area, and just to get that steel removed and the new steel work installed is about 50 grand. I look at that and I think that's 50 grand, and I'm not really seeing much for it, but it's a necessary evil of actually freeing up and doing what we need to do in that space to get what we need. Somewhere between 140, 160 pounds per square foot. But please do not just take that as gospel, as that's what it's going to be for your project. There's too many nuances, too many variations with building contracts and building works. But just, that's just an insight into the range that we've got on those 4 sites. Cool. Number 6, what are the key metrics of those sites? So that was more to do with sort of high level figures of what we bought it for, what the development costs are, what's the GDV, what's the likely profit margin that we're going to achieve. So Jack, do you want to go and I'll go back to the pictures and we can do them one by one. Marlo, you're on mute. You're on mute, Jack.
Classic. Are we alternating? So
yeah, go for it.
Starting with Marlow, we bought the site for 1.1 million. The gross development value, I think, it might even be pushing 3.25 up to 3.3. We've still got a couple of units to be sold on that scheme. Build, I believe, all in, including professional fees, we're about 900. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, 800. Yeah, actually. No, 800.
Professional fees. Probably.
Yeah, no, 800.
Yeah, nice. There you go.
All
800. Very good. And then we obviously have finance costs, other sales fees and things like that. So I think we're set to make anywhere sort of between 7 and 750 net margin on that. Over to you on the next one.
Nice. So I'm just bringing up my figures. So Tame, we bought it for 2.35 million. I mean, let's call it 2.5 million in terms of like transactional costs and fees associated with it. We will be all in from a dev cost perspective at around about 2.3 million. So the first phase of works came in at around 1 million. That was to convert 9 flats. And then our second phase of works, development costs are about 1.3 million. So 2.3 million in total. The NGDV on the scheme, we had it, was this one we have? No, it was the old multis where bricks valued a couple of weeks ago. But the gross development value for St Andrews Court will be around about £7.3 million. There's some fairly hefty finance costs in there, but ultimately, for us, it's a super profitable deal. We should walk away with about £1.6 million worth of profit on that scheme, and it's been one that we've been able to phase across various stages. So we've been shifting some commercial tenants around. We've phased the works in terms of delivering the first 9 flats. We are due to complete on 2 of those flats next week. And we will be starting the phase 2 of 11 flats in a couple of weeks' time, or if not next week, really. That's St Andrews Court. The old maltings.
Moving on to the old maltings. So we bought for 1.455. It was about 100k in acquisition and stamp duty and fees to get it over the line. Our dev costs across both phases is about 3.5 to 3.6 million. So quite a big, hefty build costs on that site. Finance costs, I don't really want to say. Almost £1 million when you tot it all up, which is painful. Given that if you actually picture it, the debt lenders have made more cash on this than we have. And all in all, this sort of total capital that we're looking at is about 6.3, and the GDV, as Ben mentioned on the last site, but it was actually this one got valued, I think, about 7.25 GDV for the whole site.
Yep. Nice. So the bank is our most recent purchase. This one's quite exciting, and I think there's been some developments over the last week or so that's that's great for us. We bought this for 800 grand. It's a bit of a labyrinth. You sort of don't really see from the image on the screen, but there's basically a retail unit, which was the old Halifax, which has ground and lower ground. I think it's about 3,000 square feet for those two spaces. And we've managed to, so we bought it for £800,000. We've just agreed a sale at around about the £400,000 mark. So I think we're effectively carving out, let me have a look at this. So total square footage throughout the whole property is 6,200 square feet. And we are, so it's only 1,600 square feet that we're selling. So we are selling off 25% of the site for half of what we bought it, which is awesome. So we're left with the rest of the site for 400 grand, which is the best part of like 4,500 square feet, which we're looking to extend and do various conversions for. So let's just take the sort of case that we think we're going to get, which is effectively 7 flats and the retail space. Bought it for 800. We are expecting to spend not much more than £1 million in costs, and we should get this revalued somewhere around £2.7 million. So there's decent margin in it for us. The sort of 20% return on GDV that we expect. But again, this one will be phased. So we're jumping in there straight away. We're stripping out the rear offices. And we are very close to getting sort of tenders sorted for converting the upper levels of the bank at the front from 3 2-bed flats to 3 3-bed HMOs, which, based on the previous question about whether we hold or sell, we will be holding those. So they will be high-yielding HMOs for us that we can throw into our portfolio. And then at the rear of the site, where we're converting and extending to create 4 additional units, we are likely to sell 3, maybe 4 of those, depending on where we get to. So yeah, real mixed bag. We've got the commercial, we've got the resi, which is HMOs, we've got the resi, which would be for sale, all sorts of different kind of extensions, planning applications, permitted developments. It's a real solid project for us to get our teeth stuck into. So hopefully found that useful in terms of understanding the metrics of all of these projects. The profitability, we're relatively open with all this stuff. Not all projects go to plan. That's just a given. When you've got 5 projects on the go, like we have, if 2 of them are amazing, 2 of them are okay, and one's not so good, you're still coming out smiling. So it's very, very, very difficult to be a developer nowadays. We're hopefully quite transparent in that. Cool. How much more will you grow? Do you want to do this one?
Yes, this was actually Jason asked a question. It is quite a difficult question to answer, because we always want everyone on our channel to think like we're industry movers and shakers. We're trying to challenge the industry, and actually we do believe that the construction and property industry does need a bit of a shape up. There's a lot of old sort of 2-3 generation property and construction businesses that have made hay with sunshine through the baby boomer period, and now it's difficult. You've got to be really on your onions to create margin, create value, keep your head at times, be patient, be diligent with the delays that come with projects. And we've been on that roller coaster since the day. So Ben and I have been operating the business for almost 7 years. I've been full-time in property for almost a decade, and Ben the same. And a lot of what we've done today is to grow our portfolio to where it is today, to deliver the 65 units that we're on site with, and then the bank on top of that. I don't know what that looks like, probably 33 to 36, maybe 37 million GDV in current pipeline. It takes a lot of resource, it takes a lot of capital, it takes a lot of investment in time, it takes a lot of growing the business and the team. So we're at a pretty comfortable, I would call sort of mature state, our business now. We're quite efficient. We've got a very, solid team. We are having to backfill one of the good members of the team, but we do have a solid team that we can really rely on and help us get to where we need to go. And I feel that if we were to scale again, we would need a lot more resource in terms of a team. We'd probably look at partly bringing more construction, or at least construction management in-house. And we want to kind of do what we do well at the moment at the current size we're at. So we've got quite a high turnover for member of the team. So without massively growing the team, we feel quite comfortable to, I suppose, ring through another size of pipeline that we've just delivered at the moment. So, yes, we'll be doing loads more exciting projects. We're not going to be doubling in size like we've done every year since the last 8 years. It's going to be more consistently operating at the size we're at. Obviously, that decision is down to like how much do you want it. Obviously, the growing a business is much more taxing than maintaining a business. I would say it's not even comparable to, if you want 20% growth, that's not 20% additional effort. It might be 40% to achieve 20% additional growth. And that comes in all forms, resource, time, funds, stress. So we're trying to, stabilize the growth, which is where we're at. Yeah. And I think some people would say we're a bit shocked. They're like, I thought you would always be grow.
I think it comes back to what we've talked about a lot, which is our like strategy on our page stuff. When we talk about like mindset and goals, I think at the beginning of the year, if you go back to January, we'd have done a session on goals for 2025, for example, and we have a strategy on a page. SOAP is called. There's a lot of blue sky thinking in it. There's also a lot of what do you want to achieve, why are you doing it, etc. And it, you should be thinking about that all the time in terms of what do you want from this. And Jack and I, have a number in terms of what we want to achieve every year in terms of like income, and effectively the business kind of needs to work back from that. So you need to have a starting point. And I think the level that we're at the moment, that achieves the targets and the goals that we sort of set out. And there's is there any need to grow any further than that? That's sort of rhetorical question really. But when we look at all the other stuff we've got going on, XP surveys are super exciting. It's had a great start to 2025, and we see a lot of progression in that business that is as far as I'm concerned, a lot more exciting than necessarily the property stuff. So it might not be that we grow XP Property, but there's every chance that we could grow the other businesses that we run as well. So good question. Hopefully that was interesting for people. And that's the FAQs from yesterday's site tour. So if you've got any further questions, drop them in the comments below, because we can throw it in at the end, or we will touch on it next week when we're back at 5 o'clock. So just moving on, just a couple of notes for those that want to find out a little bit more and listening to some interesting conversations. We got a bit carried away with Michael when we met him. We were there for I think an hour and 50 minutes instead of just an hour. So we've had to do a 2-part series. So episode 74 of the Property Funder Podcast was about, it was actually more about Jack and I, who we are, what we've done, where we've come from, and how we've got to where we are. A little bit of like history and background, but some interesting things in terms of how we've grown our businesses and the struggles that we've gone through, and the different chapters of getting to this stage. And then the episode 75, which was released 2 days ago, is a little bit more about XP Property, where we're going, what we're doing actively at the moment, where we hope to go in the future, which we sort of just touched on. But it's a really interesting conversation. Michael's built a fantastic business and have more capital. Started 10 years ago, so just a little bit longer running than XP. But he knows the trials and tribulations that you go through as a business owner. Trying to work on your business, not in your business. These are the sorts of things that we pick up on the conversation. So hopefully you find it interesting. If you want to learn a little bit more about XP, about our backgrounds, about what Avamore do, and they're helping us out and funding one of our sites, then head over to the Property Funder Podcast and tune into episodes 74 and 75. And then Jack, you've been on another podcast.
I had the privilege, and I'm sure Ben will, in the very, very near future, Andy and I actually spoke about it, to feature on the HMO podcast. So Andy and I have not actually, we've met a few times, but not actually had a really decent conversation, because I know Andy's business partner very well. It was actually really nice to sort of share, my side of property and what that looks like and what we're doing to grow, and how that resonates with what Andy sees. It's really cool to actually speak to someone that also does HMOs and developments, which is what Andy is very active doing. If you want to check out the podcast, we talk all things growing businesses, managing multiple businesses, building HMO portfolios, building a social housing portfolio, developing properties, and then also partnerships and how that works. So really good episode. Really enjoyed speaking to Andy, and it's already live, so go and check that one out too.
Sweet. Cool. If you want to know more about how we can help you guys in your businesses, we do offer mentorship, we do offer one-to-one consulting, we do offer a newly launched development mastermind as well. So if you want more like 12 monthly kind of rigid modules of how to be a property developer, how to run successful businesses, then reach out. But if you're just looking for some ad hoc support within your business, we do offer various packages where we can sit down with you for an hour, for example, lift up the bonnet in your business and try and tinker around and improve things and make it run a little bit better. So do get in touch if you're interested in that. And then we touched on, I think about a month ago, we were having a few issues with Marlow and our lending in terms of the original valuation from 18 months ago when we bought it was at a level that we weren't happy with at the time. We thought it was lower than what it needed to be, but fundamentally it got us what we needed in terms of our leverage and the funding that we needed to deliver the scheme. But ultimately, 18 months thereafter, we've now finished the scheme. We've got 5 out of the 8 flats under offer, which proved a gross development value significantly above what the RICS value came in at 18 months prior. And ultimately, the lender was sort of sticking by the original valuation. So we've got 5 under offer, almost proving that we've tested the market and we've got buyers at the levels that we're saying. Yet the lender wasn't willing to sort of shift, and it was more the RICS value, the original RICS valuer, when asked, can they redo their valuation? They very sort of lazily said, well, actually, we don't think the market's moved that much, and we'll stick to our previous valuation. I don't really see the best part of 450 grand on a 2.7 million pound valuation being, not significant enough to talk about. And that was the quantum of deficit between where we were thinking we were and where the original RICS valuation came in. So, Jack, do you want to have a quick go through sort of?
Yeah, and just a big shout out to Fadeep Meadows, who actually was the valuer who came and did the valuation. So he's qualified RICS chartered independent monitoring surveyor and also valuing RICS chartered surveyor. I believe he also does quantity surveying work as well. But just a shout out to him for stepping up, doing what he should have done, and valuing units at what they're selling for. And we've known Fadipe for a while because he's been part of our boardroom. So again, similar to Matt, if anyone wants an introduction, let us know.
Nice. Cool. And if you do get value from these podcasts, we would love you to share it with just, one person, two people, 10 people, whatever. Rate us on Spotify and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be amazing. We've changed the structure of how we do things now with the podcast and this live on a 5 on a Friday. So ultimately, the process now is we're live at 5 on a Friday. We're talking to you now. It's Friday afternoon. But we used to chop up the audio and then release it on a Tuesday at noon or something. We've sped up the process. We're a bit more efficient now. We're basically just sort of repurposing the video straight into audio format and launching it on the podcast platforms, which means we can do things faster. So at Monday at 5 a.m, we will be launching the audio version of these video podcasts on all of your audio platforms. So on your way to work on a Monday morning, you can have us, our dulcet tones in your ears on your way into the office. So yeah, just letting people know that these video recordings get repurposed in audio format. The Property Experts Podcast, the Property Experts Show on YouTube, it's the same thing. It's repurposed, but it's available in audio and video format, depending on how you want to tune in. Cool. And then just a little bit more success on Marlow, just something I thought was worth touching on. We had our first exchange today. I'm not sure if Jack even knows this, but I don't know if it was CC'd into the emails, but we've exchanged on our first sale for Marlow, and we're due to exchange on at least one more next week. So those sales that we had under offer back in January, so we had an open day in January, we had over 50 people walking around. We had 5 of the 8 flats under offer within the week after that launch day. And now we are, the best part of 3 months down the line. The legal process has progressed. We have exchanged on our first property. The difficulty now is getting Thames water connections connected. As usual, they are often the ones delaying things for us, getting building control sign-offs, and then we can set a date for completion, which for those that don't know how that process normally works, when you're buying effectively off plan, you basically exchange with a 10-day notice for completion. So once we've got building control sign-off, warranty certificates in hand, we can then serve a 10-day 10-day notice for completion to the buyers, and they have to complete within those 10 days. They don't have to wait the 10 days. For example, we served notice, I think, Wednesday on a buyer in St Andrews Court, and they are completing on Tuesday. So they only needed about 4 days to mobilise the funds and get to completion, because they're chomping at the bit to move into their fantastic new home that XP Property have created for them. Cool. And I kind of gave it away then, didn't I, in terms of spoiler alerts for have we got building control sign off at St Andrews Court. The dates on the screen are the 27th of February, when I first started talking about getting building control sign off, expecting to get building control sign off in February. Then last week I touched on it again, being the 18th of April, when we still hadn't had building control sign off. It's been months of back and forth, but finally we have partial sign off. We have sign off for the ground floors and the first floor flats, but we are still waiting on the certificates for the upper level flats that use the mist suppression system, which seems to be causing all sorts of controversy. And that is the thing that's holding up the certificates being provided for those top floor flats. So frustrating still. Good news that we can actually get flats, the 2 flats that we've got already exchanged, completed. But fundamentally we have a lot of pressure now still to try and get those building control certificates off for those top floor flats, and get also those 2 flats for sale. So yeah, good news, but also still frustrating that some of it is still dragging along. I'll take this one.
So we've been actually turning over new stones, which is always enjoyable, and meeting new people and new faces, which is really good across the board of the business. And actually one of the benefits of having an ecosystem of businesses, we've been speaking to investors about the social housing portfolio, and they sort of also expressed interest in the development side of things as well. But just sort of touch on, we are actually looking to capital raise for the social housing portfolio. We've got ongoing conversations, whether it may be for people with one or maybe a group of the assets, or equally the whole portfolio. So if you know anyone that is looking for social housing portfolio, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to pay an introductory fee on whether it's, again, just one of the assets or the group. The beauty of these assets is they're actually done, tenanted, minimum of a 10-year full repairing lease across the board. So they're pretty sort of set up and done. And the weird thing is, we've actually learned a lot of our, I suppose, contacts for investment are normally this is obviously quite dry. It's already done. It's already an income play, and a lot of the hard work and risk has already been taken out of it compared to potential other investments. So when I say other investments, like ground up development, or at the start of a project, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we're going to be closing the door on this very soon. I've just seen Ben's got a new camera angle. So if you're interested in hearing more, or even just want to have a nosy at our deck, equally just ping us a message. We're happy to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, I realised I didn't have my SLR camera on. I just had my crappy webcam. I wonder why it looked a bit funny. Anyway, we've got good high definition video footage now. Before we get jumped into the accounting side of stuff and the stuff we want to talk about, our tax accountant, it's worth saying that we offer a 0 referral bonus code. So there's a code down in the description. You can get 90% off the first 6 months of a 0 subscription using the referral code. For those that don't know what 0 is, it is a accounting platform online. So we absolutely swear by it. Every single business has a 0 account. That's where we look at all of our figures, financial figures, profit and loss, management accounts, balance sheet, cash flows. Everything is uploaded into 0, and you can manipulate all of the data as much as you want. And it's just a fantastic way of very quickly seeing snapshots within your business, reconciling payments, and having a one-stop shop for all of your financial accounting needs. So yeah, referral bonus down below, 90% off for the first 6 months. Go get it. Point number 7, accounts and more accounts. This week, I came home Wednesday. I don't know about you, but I was like, my mind was blown. Like, we spent basically the best part of 4 hours on Wednesday talking end of year tax accounts. And by the time I got home, my mind was frazzled. But ultimately, I think what I wanted to share here is that we had our tax accountant in our office. He sat with us. We talked through all of the figures. He was live changing things on screen in terms of things that we felt weren't right or needed to be changed, or comments or questions. And we think that's the way it should be done. If your accountant is an arm's length and all they're doing is taking all of your information, spitting out what they think is correct, sending it back to you to sign, and you've just accepted that it's right, I think you're in for a lot of problems. You should be scrutinizing everything that they're doing, questioning things that maybe don't look right, or questioning things that you don't understand. They are there to advise you, but you need to be pushing them and challenging them on certain things, because we've known from historic conversations and accounts that have maybe already been filed, and then we look back and our new tax accountant is pulling holes in it, and querying why they've done certain things. It's definitely a process that you need to get a lot more familiar with, and have them sit there with you, run through every single line item, ticking things off. And that was what our Wednesday was all about. Basically, our group structure now is massive. So we've got all sorts of SPVs. We've then got trading entities, investment entities. It all goes up to a group structure, which we've shown on the calls before. But yeah, the bigger you get, the more projects you do, the bigger that sort of organizational chart grows, and the more accounting will, the more accounting there'll be. So yeah, just want to say, get them in the office, get it up on screen, talk through it all together. Don't just go back and forth on emails, because it's going to be way more difficult to get it right. Anything you wanted to say, Jack?
No, just it was super useful having it in person. We cover a lot more ground. And yeah, I feel like one of the reasons it was 4 hours is how much our previous accountant fucked up on a few things. So yeah, still none the wiser.
I'm sure we can fill everyone in on share sales and some of the intricacies around where we've got ourselves to on some of one of our projects in particular, which is we probably spent 2 hours of those 4 hours talking about that one project. But it's definitely something you need to sit down with your tax accountant and look at. Cool. On to some Q&A. We've had some regulars commenting. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Peter. And we're going to go through some of the questions that you guys have. We've got one come in from James, which is great, and we'll come on to that very soon. James from LinkedIn, thanks for commenting. We'll come on to yours after we've tackled these three. So Daniel says, hi lads, what was the fire system you have installed? I'm interested in the system. I'm assuming you're talking about the St Andrews Court ones that we're having the issues with in the top floor flats. It's a Plumis water mist system. So it's a high pressure mist system. Ultimately, if there is a fire in the kitchen, for example, you've got the auto mist plates on the walls, which is ducted back to probably the size of like a desktop PC under the sink, which is like the pumping system. So it's just done off the mains. Your mains comes into the pumping, the pump under the sink. And then if there is a fire, what happens is there is an infrared type sensor that basically directs the mist directly to the fire and douses the fire very, very quickly. It's got a much faster response time than a typical sprinkler. It doesn't saturate everything around it as much as a normal sprinkler, where it's like just pissing out water. It starves the fire of air by creating this fine mist. It has been, I've read a couple of documents now because of the process that I've gone through with building controls to sort of say that their testing sort of proves that it's equal or better than a typical sprinkler system is. So Plumis is one of the biggest manufacturers. The conversation with my fire engineer was quite enlightening in terms of when we were going through this issues a couple of weeks ago. He was at a fire exhibition, and Plumis were there, and he mentioned the problems that we were having with this building control body, and he basically said, "Who's the building control body? Because we'll sue them if they're sort of suggesting that their system isn't viable for the situation that we've got it in." It's basically there's a lot of background behind it, and from what I understand, the BS 991 was updated in 2024. There was no mention of mist systems within that BS standard, and the reason behind it is that they're bringing out a whole new BS standard for mist systems, because mist systems in themselves, maybe 10 years ago, weren't as good as the high pressure mist systems that you get nowadays. And they want to bring out a full specific British standard for that. But I think it's caused all sorts of issues around different fire engineers and different fire bodies kind of fully understanding what the systems can do and what performance they can provide. But it's a sort of system. I think it cost us the 3 nozzles that we've got in those top floor flats. So we've got 3 times 3, and I think it did come to about 10k in total. So you're looking about £3,000 per flat to get that system installed. We only installed it because of the slightly exaggerated travel distances to get down from our mezzanine spaces, and the fact that we're going through a kitchen to get to the protected lobby. So yeah, a Plumis fire system in short. I've just rambled on about the long-winded side of things and where we've got to with it, but yeah, Plumis system. Jack's dog.
Yeah, so my dog was barking at the window last week. Interestingly, got a fun fact about animals and mirrors. So there's this grade of intelligence testing they do on animals, where they basically put a dot on the animal's like head or something, and then they monitor the animal to see whether they try and rub the dot off or see and know that it's themselves in the mirror and have got something on their head. My dog is not that smart and doesn't believe that a mirror is him, so he's not that thick. Yeah, he's a bit thick. Coincidentally, our other dog does know it's herself in the mirror. So intelligence barrier for Cheddar. He is not the smartest dog in the kennel. We'll get on to your more serious question, Peter, even though I love the comment. Hopefully not a stupid question. So Jack mentioned for a flip, they typically aim for 10% profit on GDV with a turnaround within a year. This is lower margin compared to, say, 20%, for example, on developments, because your experience has helped account for the unknown costs and resales delays. Also reduce market risks by exiting quickly. So the question is there a tipping point on profit versus GDV where this becomes challenging to secure short-term loans? So flips are obviously very, very different to developments. The profit on GDV is normally the buffer that a lender like a bank, who you're kind of alluding to, Peter, is trying to build margin in for themselves. So if the build costs go up high, or the gross development value comes down, or we've misinterpreted the timeframes, then there's a buffer there for a debt lender. With flips, there's no planning risk typically. There's less construction risk because you can get on site day one. And there's less sales risk because you've only got to get rid of one unit. And fundamentally, if you price it at a 10% of a discount to break even, you'd probably assume that you'd sell it pretty quickly. So the thing about flips is you just can't secure flips if you're looking for a 20%. Well, you can, but it's really difficult to build a pipeline of flips if you're looking for a 20% margin. Because if everyone was making a 20% margin on a 700 grand house, why wouldn't everyone be flipping houses? Especially now stamp duty rates have gone up and everyone's watched grand designs, flipping houses has become more and more and more difficult. So you have to refine those margins and get better, do more volume. And I suppose the de-risking part is doing 5 flips rather than doing just 1 for us. So that's how we've sort of, I suppose, combated that and argued that point, and that's fundamentally why we only look for a 10% margin. Obviously, if we get a higher margin, we have had flips that have had a higher margin, but I'm talking about on place of bidding. You need to be a little bit more forgiving on the margin that you're making.
Nice. Cool. Let's go to the viewer questions. James, if you're still tuning in, if you were looking to buy a large 3 to 4 bedroom property flat in an area with high demand for HMO rooms to maximize the number of bedrooms while minimizing planning and licensing hurdles, what are your options? In 1, strict Article 4 area, or 2, no Article 4 area? To buy a large high demand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really operate in Article 4 areas, full stop, just because I feel that you're taking planning risk unless you get a conditional offer accepted. And in the housing market, you very rarely can get a conditional offer subject to planning agreed, especially if it's a flat. They just want it gone, probably, the seller. They're not going to wait around for you to get HMO change of use planning approval. So I think that's generally my view on Article 4. Not a massive advocate for operating in Article 4 areas. If there's no Article 4, I would run the numbers on what you don't need the consents or licensing for. Make sure that you buy it at that value, or even get the deal over the line at that value. And then you can obviously then enhance it thereafter. So for an example, we've got a 7-bed at the moment, but we paid what we're happy to deliver as a 6-bed. So the numbers work as a 6-bed. And then if we get the additional unit, we're happy, and that's, cherry on the cake, but it's not necessarily what we're needing. So we're combating that risk. So I hope that's answered it. I've kind of said we just don't operate in Article 4 areas, and that's how we get something secured.
Yeah, my only comment would be not to shy away from licensing. If you can max out the number of rooms but you need licensing, get a license. It's not that difficult a process, and fundamentally it's going to be a second set of eyes in terms of making sure you are compliant. And there's a lot of responsibility now as you as a property investor, landlord, to make sure that your properties are safe and they've got the right fire system, fire detection systems installed, etc. And by going down a licensing route, you're going to have someone come around and check that you've got all that in place. So I wouldn't really necessarily shy away from it if you have to get planning, if you have to get licensed. But it maximizes the property for you in your return. I don't see why you wouldn't just do it.
Yeah, completely agree.
Advanced agency. How would you try and find a social housing provider for a development scheme? Go on Contracts Finder or search on a Google. Wondered if you had any tips. Yeah, it's a difficult one actually. We haven't had to. So the social housing portfolio that we've done, the registered provider came to us, or one of our partners had the relationship with the registered provider. They had a mandate for us to go out and find them opportunities and develop and deliver them, units. So we sort of had it easy. We haven't had to do any large enough property development schemes whereby we've had to have an affordable housing provision, because we utilize things like permitted development. So under permitted development, Class MA, for example, converting an office to a flat like the old Maltings and Sandwich Court, there is no Section 106 affordable housing contribution needed. There is no social housing needed on site. It's all private resi. So we haven't had to build a scheme out whereby it's new build 20 flats, whereby 40% of those 20 need to be affordable housing, and therefore you need a social housing provider to take on those units. That being said, Jack's on the Ground Up podcast with Dorian, who this is his bag, this is what he does. In terms of how he finds housing providers, Jack, do you know, or has he just built such a good reputation for himself that he's?
Yeah, I mean, with Dorian, he basically says there's only a few that will buy the stock in his area, so it's a very small market where he is, so you kind of know them. There are actually agents that make those introductions for you, so you go to them packaged with, I've got 7 affordable units that need trading. They then go to their network of affordable, they're basically RPs, and essentially vice versa, they go right, take it to market, then they actually go to market to get bids, and that's exactly what we did with our new build site that we've got in legals. So if you'd like an introduction to one of those agents, let us know. Advanced agency, and we could hopefully help.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is to ask the council. The council will have, obviously deal with social housing providers day in, day out. So, I'd imagine there's probably a list of some kind that the council can provide you. So reach out to them as well. We've got some good questions coming in. Thanks very much. Any lenders you recommend for high leverage, low interest rates on HMOs and apartment schemes? Who we used lately? So you're talking about end scheme, right? Of basically finish the asset. You want to leverage as high as you can to get as much as your money out, and you want the lowest interest rate you can possibly get. So
I'd probably say the HMO and the apartment scheme market are two different places that I would recommend. So I'd probably say your lenders aren't necessarily going to have that much crossover. For HMOs, your best leverage you're going to get is realistically like 70-75% LTV, the classic 65% loan to GDV, and then 100% of the build costs. And the best lender in the market at the moment, I believe, is Octane. I don't think you're going to find much better than Octane. You could go with a slightly smaller boutique lender, which we often do with our HMOs, because often the professional fees around debt lending on small deals mean that it doesn't really matter what rate you're getting. If you go market leading rates and their professional fees are, 800 plus VAT for a monitoring surveyor, I've got people that where they have asset managers that go out for £180 plus VAT per visit. So that saving, because it's such a small product, like 200, 300, 400 grand, is actually outweighing the debt cost that you're looking at. So what I'd highly recommend is compare them with all the fees that you're going to pay associated with that lender. And that's where Octane are good, because they're very lean on the sort of monitoring and legal fees. Obviously, you've got your Shawbrooks, you've got your more sort of boutique lenders. There's I'm just trying to think of some other lenders. I'll pull them up as we go, but we'll move on to
Going to say from an exit perspective, if the question is regarding when you finish the properties and moving on, we've had a lot of success with Kent Reliant. They've been very, very good from a rates perspective and a leverage perspective and a speed perspective. And then Interbay, I think, is Interbay we've had.
Interbay with Exit Finance, yeah.
Exit Finance. But yeah, Kent Reliant have been
Landbay, you're thinking, is the other option. And then just quickly on apartment schemes. And then on apartment schemes, you're in a different ball game, because you can actually get stretched senior finance in that market, which you can't really get in the HMO market. So whatever I say on this recommendation, I would definitely recommend getting a good broker involved that understands the market. We know a few, Sam Lowney, Stefan from Willow Isle, and would definitely recommend them. So if you do need an introduction, do let us know. And also P10 Financial, again, know their stuff. But if you can go into the stretch senior perspective, again, for developments, there's no point in leveraging it to the tilt if you've got an equity JV partner, because your finance costs are going to be higher to get that leverage. But if you do want leverage, you can actually get some really good stretch senior products and I've seen something up to like 85%, 90% loan to cost. And I'm looking at those different types of products. They are a bit more picky in terms of what borrowers they will back and what schemes they'll lend on. But coincidentally, happy to introduce you to one of the brokers that we mentioned, and hopefully get you some high leverage on that scheme.
Nice.
On to Sash Window.
Cool. Sash Window.
One of our contractors in Central Suites is Sash Window, but I don't think they're Cambridge, so I thought it might have been them.
Nice. So on your new build apartment schemes, do you have to amend planning applications or state to the council the apartments you're building are going to be HMOs? Do you navigate this in a certain way? I mean, ultimately, to move from a C3 use to C4 up to 6 person, which is a HMO up to 6 persons, it is a permitted development, right? So unless the council have specifically said in the decision notice that they are restricting and removing permitted development rights from your development, there shouldn't be much in the way of you creating HMOs off the back of finishing those apartments. So effectively going from C3 to C4. So yeah, that's typically how we would go about it. I mean, I think, you could regularize it if you really wanted to, by just going back in for an amendment or a new application to kind of regularize the C3 to C4 change of use, but probably no need to do that really when it's a permitted development right. And I've got time for one more. Okay. Property deals daily. When trying to maximize value on a site with planning, is there a specific area you focus on, e.g. more square footage, property features like balconies, different bed types? Yeah, good question. We've done all of that on St Andrews Court, for example. We've maximized out on the square footage. Balconies, I always think, when you're spending probably somewhere between 5 and 8 grand on a balcony, you're typically going to get 10 to 15 grand in value in terms of the areas that we work in anyway. Obviously, that's not going to be true for everywhere that you go, but certainly the sort of affluent market towns in the home counties that we operate in, you are going to have that sort of level. And a good question was asked yesterday at our investor tour that is worth touching on here. It's, does it actually add that 10 to 15K? Or if it costs you 10K to build it and it's potentially added 10K of paper value, is it still worth doing? And I would more often than not say that it is, because you're going to sell that unit faster. So without that private amenity, it might be worth 10k less, but you might take a lot longer to sell it. Whereas with spending the money on the balcony, you might not get a increase in sales value to the tune of £10,000 that you spend, but it might sell a lot faster, which means that you might not spend 10k in finance costs shifting it, or sitting on the market for ages. So it's definitely a great way of adding value. And then different bed types. When I worked for the Berkeley Group, part of what I would do with the architects and the design team is to optimize the scheme as much as possible. And part of that process would have been changing the development mix. So if you've got two large 3 beds, okay, well, actually, can we get 3 or 4 1 and 2 beds out of that by changing the development mix, and getting more units? And generally, the smaller the unit, the higher the pound per square foot rate. So you're not technically adding any square footage, but you're just increasing the value of that square footage because you're selling smaller units at a higher pound per square foot rate. So all of those things that you've mentioned are very good ways of doing it. Maximizing value. I mean, adding square footage, adding more mass, utilizing volumes and throwing in extra floor levels. Again, we did that very well at the old Maltings by adding mezzanines and extra floor zones in to get that square footage additional space. Maybe that's something we can come back to another time. But good question, and all of the things.
Tons of questions.
Yeah, cool. We'll call that a day. Thanks for all the questions. That's been amazing. I don't think we've had that many questions at the end of one of these. So thanks for tuning in and throwing those questions in the mix. Do follow us on all of the social platforms, and rate us on Spotify. Leave a review on Apple if you have got value from this, and hopefully see you again next week. Have a great weekend, everyone. Catch you later. Bye.